Hey, my name's James. If you're not familiar with me, I'm a football strength and conditioning coach. I've been studying sports science and football specific strength and conditioning for over 15 years combined now, and run a coaching company called Matchfit Football. We specialise in strength conditioning specifically for footballers. In this video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to break down how to plan your own football specific lower body gym session. Okay, so I'm going to take you through step by step the different things that I think about and go through when I plan a lower body gym session. So that you know what you need to be aware of to include into yours and how it should be structured. What I'm going to go through is just one example of one approach that you can take. And this approach has worked for me and it works for all of the players that I work with as well. And you can adapt it as well. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to cover here, I'm going to go through slide by slide, is the first thing you have to focus on is you need to have a plan. Don't just do workouts. If you want to get results and make progress with your lower body strength and power, you need to have a long-term plan, and you'll see why that is the case in a minute when you just see how much stuff you need to cover. Doing random workouts is never going to be able to cover this in a structured way, which is going to enable you to make progression. So see your training as a long-term thing, not just doing one workout or a workout here and there and thinking that that workout is going to make all the difference. It's how everything comes together, how every different piece of your program comes together, which leads to progress. Okay, so that's the first thing I just wanted to cover there. Second thing here, so it's going to move myself up here. This is something called the force velocity curve. If you've watched any of my previous videos, I've covered this before. So what this essentially shows you is it's something called surfing the curve, a process. It's the different types of strength and how they transfer over into athletic performance. Okay, so at the very top here, we've got maximal strength. And this, according to the graph here, as we can see, maximal strength is when the force which we are having to apply is very high, and therefore the speed and the velocity of that movement that we're doing is low. Okay, down the other end of the spectrum, we've got speed, where obviously the speed of the movement is very fast, and therefore the force that we're having to work against or produce is not as high. And then in the middle, we've got power. And this is, right down the middle between the two. So it's a mixture of strength and, having to work against force and apply force and generate quite a high amount of force, and also combining that with speed as well. So moving that force or that load at speed. Okay, so the movement is going to be faster than the movements up here at this the max strength end of the force velocity curve here. Okay, so just wanted to break that down. So this here is a process. I will take players through a process called surfing the curve. We want to cover every different type of strength which is on this curve multiple times throughout the season. And it's going to differ between in-season and off-season how we can cover this. Through this video, I'm going to show you how to create an in-season lower body gym session for footballers. Okay, so I'm going to cover the structure I use for an in-season session. So what I tend to do is I just split this curve right down the middle, and I would focus on from around here, peak power up to max strength. So let's say that the lowest number of reps I would go to working with strength during the season is 6 reps. So let's say up here, we're working around the max strength sort of range of this curve, and we're going to go 6 reps here. Then I would go a little bit further down, 8 reps, a bit further down, 10 reps, and a little bit further down to 12 reps. 12 reps is the highest number of reps I would go when working on strength. And then what I would do is that I would then work backwards. So I could do 12 reps to 10 reps to 8 reps to 6 reps. So I'd keep repeating that cycle back and forth, and I'd probably do 2 blocks of each. So 2 blocks of 4 weeks of each. So if I did 6 reps, I'm doing that for 8 weeks, and then 8 reps, 8 weeks, 10 reps, 8 weeks, and so on, just moving up and down throughout the season. So make sure that we're thoroughly covering this part of the curve here. But you don't just want to work strength if you just work strength without making sure that you also condition the muscles to be explosive, there's a risk that you might find that you're getting stronger, but it's not it's not transferring over to you becoming more powerful and explosive. So I always want to make sure I'm covering that area of the force velocity curve as well. So down here, from this point, these are the more powerful movements where there might be plyometrics or more ballistic movements. And I'll be doing the same thing here. So working up and down this curve at the same time, back and forth, partnering these exercises with the exercises that I'm doing here, okay? And making sure I'm getting a combination throughout. So for example, if I'm doing like a true plyometric down here, so working on more maximal speed stuff, I'll make sure that I'm having that at one point combined with my more maximal strength work, and also at the same time, not at the same time, in a different block, I might make sure that I'm also partnering that with my strength speed work, okay? And the same applies to the different areas of speed, or the faster movements down here, down this half of the curve, and partnering them with different types of strength from power up to max strength, okay? Hopefully that makes sense, just to make sure that we're thoroughly covering this curve. So that's my approach, that's the method I use, and it works really well with the players that I do that with. And we tailor this to the player as well, depending on the level that they are, in terms of the exercises that we're using, and also the load that they're ready for as well. So up here, if we're working on maximal strength, they might not be ready to lift quite heavy loads. So we probably use more isometric based exercises up here, where we can still develop max strength. But isometrics are when you're performing an exercise and the muscles aren't lengthening or shortening, they're staying the same length, but they're still producing maximal force, okay? So that's the force velocity curve, just briefly covering that there. Just to give you a concept of what we're doing over time, longer term with this approach. Now the next thing you want to do, I won't cover it in detail in this video, I'll do a separate video on warm-ups and cool-downs, but I want to do a ramp warm-up before I start my main gym session. So that stands for raise, so raise the heart rate, activate, mobilize, and potentiate, okay? And I tend to do at least 2 exercises which touch on each of these, which is why it's spelled RRAAMP for ramp, okay? So raise, activate, mobilize, and potentiate, just to make sure that I'm doing a thorough warm up and I'm prepared before starting the main part of the session, okay? Now, the next part it's going to touch on is the reps and the sets. So again, I briefly touched on that before when we were looking at the force velocity curve. So what I would do, if I'm starting the program with my strength with 12 reps, I'd probably do 2 blocks using 12 reps for strength, okay? And as I work my way up, again, I'm going to 10 reps, 8 reps, and 6 reps, and then working my way back down, 6 reps again, 8 reps, 10 reps, 12 reps. And the same here, if I'm working around here with the power stuff, I might go between 7 and 3 to 4 reps. So again, with the plyometrics, you can't just keep doing rep after rep after rep and hoping that's going to lead to more improvement. You have to use them quite quite sparingly. Okay, so I wouldn't be doing more than, I definitely wouldn't be doing more than 7 reps, and then I'd be having quite a big rest in between that, because I want to make sure that the body is quite fresh before performing each of those sets, or as fresh as it can be. So that's what I would do there, and I'll go into the structure of how I piece it all together further along in the video. Okay, so next thing to touch on is deload weeks. So this is a really important concept that you definitely need to implement. If you just keep trying to progress and push further with your training, okay, your body is going to hit maybe a plateau, or it's going to start overtraining, and you need to make sure you've got enough rest and recovery time in there. Deload weeks are a really great way just to give your body a little bit of an extra opportunity to adapt and recover and feel fresher before you go into your next training block. We want to make sure that we're training with intensity, not just training sort of sub-maximally and going through the motions of each session. So making sure that we're putting everything that we can into each session. So a deload week is really important. The only time that I wouldn't necessarily have a deload week in, I'd normally have this in at the start of every new block. So I do 4 weeks, and then the 5th week is a deload week, introducing the next training block that we're going to do, building up from there, another 4 weeks, and then another deload week. That's just quite a nice way of doing it. With strength conditioning, to get results, the most important thing is consistency. So the training and the long-term plan needs to be sustainable, something where the player knows if they work hard, they're going to get a little break, their body's going to be able to recover, and they're also going to be able to sustain and improve their performances on the pitch at the same time, and not burn out and not risk overtraining. Okay, so that's why deload weeks are really important. As I was going to say, the only time that I wouldn't necessarily have a deload week in is if the player is struggling to be consistent because they've got things just coming up in terms of maybe they're traveling, or maybe they've picked up an injury and they can't train in the normal way, the deload is probably naturally built in there already. So there's not necessarily any need to actually have a full deload week in there. They can just keep progressing because they're not able to stay as consistent as you would like to in an ideal world. Okay, so that's deload weeks, really important. If you're going to stay consistent with a process, and you can do that, make sure they're in there. Now the next thing, it's going to have to move myself around as we go here. This is really important. These are all the movements, the muscles that we want to train, and the contractions we want to think about in a lower body gym session for a footballer. You can see there's a lot to cover here. Okay, so this is why you can't just expect to do this. Seeing your progress with strength conditioning just as individual workouts is not an optimal approach, and it's not going to work for you. You need to see the overall plan to be able to cover all of this so that it all comes together. That's how you become a better football athlete. Okay, so the first thing we're going to think about is isometrics. So we need to have an isometric when I'm planning a session and an overall structure for lower body sessions. We need to make sure we've got some isometrics in there. So like I said, that is when you perform an exercise where the muscle isn't lengthening or shortening. You're staying in the same position, but the muscles are still contracting maximally. A true plyometric. So true plyometric or fast plyometric, this is obviously when we're rebounding off the ground. It can be double foot or single foot, so you're bilateral or unilateral. And this is when there's literally a split second of ground contact time. So for example, when you're sprinting, that would be an example of a true plyometric, because your foot is, the contact time with the ground, each time the foot makes contact with the ground, is really short in comparison to, let's say you're landing from going up for a jump, and then upon that landing, you're trying to change direction as well. Your foot is in contact with the ground for a longer amount of time. So that's a slower plyometric, okay? So we want to make sure that we've got true plyometrics in there. That also will help train the efficiency of the stretch shortening cycle. And that's the mechanism around the lower leg. So looking around the heel, the ankle, and the lower leg, how those structures lengthen when we're absorbing energy, okay, and they're storing energy, and then how efficiently they contract and release energy. So that's going to help a player be really explosive, and making sure that's nice and fluid will help a player's level of power and explosiveness out on the pitch, okay? So ballistic exercises, they can be also just slightly slower plyometrics, ones where we're changing direction, and like I said, when there's a slightly longer ground contact time. Also ones when we're throwing as well, so throwing medicine balls, things like that. I'd have those in there too. You need to think about single leg stability, and that's really important. Unilateral and bilateral power, so performing jumps and landings off of one leg and two legs as well. Reactive strength, so let's say for example I'm jumping off a box and then trying to jump up immediately as soon as I land, so that's that reactive strength as well. And I would reduce the ground contact time with that reactive strength by jumping from a lower platform onto the ground and then jumping up again. If I'm jumping taking off from a higher platform, again, it's going to take a little bit longer. My ground contact time is going to be a little bit longer before I am able to jump off again, because I've got more force that I have to absorb. So trying to increase the speed of that. Change of direction needs to be in there as well, moving both forwards and backwards with our movements. And in terms of the muscles, we want to be training hamstrings, quads, the groins and the adductors, so down the inside of the leg, and the glutes as well, tibialis anterior, so the front of the shin, the calves as well. And in terms of other movements, we want to be thinking about triple extension. So that's when the angle at the front of the ankles, back of the knees, and the front of the hips are extending. So when you're doing many of the jumping exercises that you'll do would include triple extension. And these won't all be different exercises. A lot of exercises will cover a lot of these things at the same time, okay? So triple extension, hinging as well. So if you think about hip thrust or a deadlift, that's when you're hinging at the hips. Lateral and diagonal movements. The stretch shortening cycle, which I've already covered, want to make sure we're training that. Squat pattern down here. So that can be a normal bilateral squat, it can be a single leg squat, loads of different variations of squats we can do. The lunge pattern as well, we want to make sure we've got some rotation in there, potentially some exercises where we're having to carry load, at the same time. We might perform different movements whilst we're carrying. Bracing as well. We want to look at having full range of movement in there. So we might perform some deep squats where we're using the full range of the movement. Also some exercises which are more like a sport-specific, football-specific range of movement. So it might be just like we're partially squatting down, so like a quarter squat or a half squat, and then powering back up. So specific range of movement in there as well. Exercise as well, where there's no counter movement. So an example of that would be a box squat. So I'm coming down, sitting on the box, and then I don't have any momentum to then store energy and then to help me when I go back up to standing up. So I'm coming down, pausing, and I'm having to drive up from that complete stop. Okay, so having exercises like that in there. Landing, so practicing our landing and make sure that's nice and safe, nice, soft, stable landing. Also jumping as well, so jumping off of two legs, off of one leg, laterally, diagonally, forwards and backwards. And also thinking about our movement mechanics, so making sure that we are constantly brushing up on how well we move in terms of our running mechanics. We can have that built into our lower body gym sessions as well. Thinking about that with every exercise where that's applicable. Looking at the movement mechanics, for example, if you were doing like a box step up, when you step up onto the box, you could drive the knee up, just making sure everything is aligned. You've got one knee up and then the opposite arm up, just as you would when you would be out running on the pitch, and nice and stable throughout the core during that movement as well. You need to think about firing up the nervous system at the start, which will help with just readiness, and also mentally it will help prepare for the session as well. And it also helps with muscle activation, so you can produce more power in the strength exercises which are to come. And we also, at the end, what I quite like to do is, if we haven't already done it at the start, just finish the session by increasing the heart rate again. And that just helps because it means that if we're doing a lot of stability work, a lot of strength work, you don't necessarily then feel after that session that you're not going to necessarily be sweating and feel really like your muscles are sore and fatigued. So instead of leaving a session feeling that, even though you have done really good quality work, you don't necessarily just feel like that. I like to raise the heart rate again at the end of the session, so that the player, the last thought they have of that session is, yeah, I've put a lot of good work in there, okay? Because they've raised that heart rate up again. So these are all the things there that I would build into my lower body gym session thinking, not just covering this all in one session. Like I said, some exercises will cover multiple of these, but definitely over a training block, I definitely want to be covering all of these things here, okay? Now, looking at the session structure, this again is just one approach that you can use, but it's the structure which I found works really well and can be well molded around different players' levels and around their training weeks as well. So I start with that ramp warm-up that I mentioned there. I'll do another video covering those. Then what I would do is that I'd go into some quick footwork, and this would be match specific. So the idea behind this is, because you're fresh at the start of the session, that's a good time to do some speed work, some quick footwork. So that's one of the reasons. The other reason, like I said, is to mentally get you switched on, okay? Raise the heart rate again after you've already done your warm up. So if it's dipped down a little bit or it's not quite as high as you'd like, we're doing some quick footwork to raise the heart rate a little bit more, continue to warm you up. Also, it's a good opportunity to work on your footwork and your coordination there when you're feeling quite fresh. Here, I would make sure that they are match specific movements. So I might do like a shuffle forwards or to the side, jump up for a header, and then shuffle again. So really football match specific there. So I would do a couple of sets of that. Okay, making sure in between I'm getting plenty of rest so I can do that quick footwork with maximum intensity. Then when I'm going into my main part of the session, I like to use trisets. And the reason behind that is because I like to combine stability work with the strength work and also power in there as well. So what I would start with is a stability based exercise, okay? And then I would do my main strength based exercise, which would be covering from here up to here. So one of these elements here on the force velocity curve. So that's what I would do there. And then I combine that, I'd finish off the tricep with a power based exercise. So that would be an exercise from this half of the curve down here, okay? So that's how I would structure that. And then I would probably do any trisets you want to do, but I tend to have 3 trisets built into a session, okay? And in terms of the number of reps, what you would do, number of sets, is you complete the tricep, and then because we're sort of working on, not always working on the same muscles here, you can probably then just start with a stability exercise straight away for your next set without having much of a break, okay? Because this is going to be low intensity, and you're going to be able to rest here, prepare for your strength exercise. This exercise here, the stability one, is also going to better prepare you in terms of muscle activation for the strength exercise which comes. Then that is then going to better prepare you for the power exercise which comes after that, okay? And because we've got this sequence of it being a tricep, you can probably then go straight back into the next set. We're starting with the stability exercise straight away. So it's quite time efficient as well, okay? So what I would do is 3 trisets in a session, and then I'd finish off, like I said, by raising the heart rate again. So I'd have either a movement mechanics based exercise here, or just an exercise which is more cardio based, but more also focused on speed repeatability. So reproducing bursts of intensity with a break in between, okay? And that will go quite nicely with the strength and power work that we've done here. And you're going to leave the session feeling that you've worked, done a good session there, okay? So that's how I would structure that, and then I'd finish off with a cool down after that. So hopefully that's all explained quite clearly. And then in terms of giving you an example of how this would look, here's an example here, okay? So this is from the Elite Football Athlete program. So this is what it looks like on the coach's side for me when I'm planning a session. So you can see here how the session looks. So I'm starting with that footwork up here. Okay, then I'm going into my first tricep, my second tricep, my third tricep, and then finishing off with my mechanics or cardio-based exercise here. Okay, so you can see here, my first exercise for the quick footwork is a backward, forward, diagonal header. I can give you a quick view of that. I'm just going to mute the video so it doesn't play really loudly. So this will be a quick example showing you what to do. Throughout these videos, I also explain the movements as well. So that's hopefully I'll do, there we go. So we're going backwards, forwards, up, header, and backwards again, header, and backwards again. So that's just an example of something you could do for that. And then straight into our first tricep, okay? So here I've got a rebound jump lateral drop box landing. So this is my stability exercise into a Swiss ball wall sit, an isometric one with kettlebells as well. So this is my isometric strength-based exercise I've got in there, okay? Then I've got my true plyometric exercise here. So I tend to always have that true plyometric as the final exercise on the first tricep, okay, to make sure that's always being covered in every session. So I've got forward, backward, knee tuck jumps here, okay? My next tricep, I've got an assisted reverse lunge, okay? So this is like the lunging pattern here. We've got the hinge here, we've got a lion barbell hip thrust isometric hold. So because we're doing 6 reps here, lower amount of reps, but a higher amount of load. So because we tend to work with youth players, this is an isometric one here, but you could just do it as a normal hip thrust as well with a barbell. So that one's there. Then we've got hip drive. So this is the power-based exercise again with the hip drive. It's working on that hip extension, which will tie in. It will tie into the triple extension depending on the exercise. We've also extended at the front of the ankles and the back of the knees as well. Okay, the next tricep, again, stability is the first one, a one-handed wall sprint. We've got a wall knees to floor exercise here for the strength. And then we've got a med ball assisted falling lunge deceleration here for our power-based exercise. Finishing off with a hop to shuffle ladder exercise here. So we're integrating the ladders in this exercise. This is the final cardio exercise there. To give you another example, if I go into this one. Okay, so we're starting off with our quick footwork, some square diagonal shuffle to hops there. Into our first tricep, so again, a lateral rebound jump, single leg lateral drop box landing. It's quite a mouthful, but some of these exercises get a little bit technical the further our players move along. So that's the stability, a barbell squat, and then that's our strength exercise. And we've got our power-based exercise here, low to high on the spot alternating hops. And you can see the pattern that we're following there. So there's 3 triceps, okay, and then finishing off again, with the cardio based one. And throughout these, we're covering all the muscle groups, working in all those different movements that I mentioned back on the slides here. Okay, so we're covering all of these things that I've listed here in each of these sessions. Okay, so hopefully that all makes sense for you in terms of understanding the things that you need to cover in lower body gym sessions and seeing it as more like a longer term plan where everything comes together and you become a really well-rounded football athlete who's not only strong but is powerful and fast and able to change direction at speed and decelerate and accelerate at speed as well, jump powerfully and also land really safely as well, and is injury resilient at the same time. Okay, so hopefully if you got some value from this, let me know in the comments if you've got any questions. If you're interested in learning more about this type of training, I've got a book that I've linked in the description below this video. It's called the Football Fitness Bible that you can get, and also our training program, Elite Football Athlete. That is also linked in the description below this video, so you can check that out. Again, if you've got any questions or comments, let me know in the comments section. If you'd like me to cover anything specific, go into a little bit more detail, let me know. I'm very happy to do that. Thanks again for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll catch you soon in the next one.